this is text problem 910. And we're given a table that gives us a couple of years, the nominal GDP, the population, and the price index. And we're asked to calculate the economic growth rate during the year between 2016 and 2017, which is what we're given in the table. So first of all, let's remember what the economic growth rate is. So this is just from a definition out of your textbook. We measure economic growth by the change in real GDP per capita. Okay, I'm going to pull up Excel to help me with this problem. So I'll go ahead and write down here at the bottom so we'll remember this, the definition of economic growth. It's the change in real GDP per capita. Okay, so they want to know the economic growth rate, and whenever we see the word rate, we're talking in percents. So what we're actually asked is to find the percent change in real GDP per capita. So how do you find the percent change in real GDP per capita? Well, first, we need to find the real GDP per capita for each of the 2 years that were given, 2016 and 2017. And you can see that I've already typed into Excel all the information out of the table that was given in the problem. Of course, you can do this on paper with a pen. I just like to use Excel since I'm already here on my computer. So we have the nominal GDP, the population, and the price index for each year. So recall that in order to find the real GDP per capita, we have to have, so real GDP, I'm going to use PC to abbreviate per capita. Remember, this is the real GDP divided by the population, right? So that's what per capita means. So now the question is, how do we find real GDP? We're not given real GDP, we're given nominal GDP. So again, we have another formula. Remember that real GDP, and all of these formulas are in your textbook. In the recent chapters, I don't think they're all in chapter 9, but in the recent chapters here. So real GDP is just our nominal GDP divided by the price index. I'm just going to abbreviate that PI, and then all of that times 100. I'll put the nominal GDP divided by price index in parentheses, so we'll remember that the times 100 applies to all of it, not just the bottom of the fraction. So the real GDP, we know, we can calculate if we're given a price index, is the nominal GDP divided by that price index, and then all of that times 100. So now we have all the pieces that we need in order to find the real GDP per capita for each of our 2 years, 2016 and 2017. So I'll go ahead and add a couple of columns to the table here. First of all, I'll add real GDP, because that's what we have to calculate first, right? And then we'll have to divide by population in order to get our real GDP per capita. So I know that my real GDP is my nominal GDP divided by my price index, and all of that times 100. So I'll get Excel to do the math for me here. So again, I'll use parentheses to remind myself and Excel that the whole thing's going to be times 100 in the end. So my real GDP is nominal GDP, which is this cell here, divided by my price index, which is this one here, and then all of that in parentheses times 100. And I want to do that for both years, so I'll just get Excel to copy that formula down to the next line, and that's why I like to use Excel, because it'll just copy the formula down for me and I don't have to do the same thing over and over. But you notice up here in the line where you can see my formula that for real GDP for 2017, I've got the same thing. I've got this cell, the nominal GDP, divided by this cell, the price index, and then all of that times 100. So now I have real GDP for both years. But what I want is real GDP per capita. And anytime we say per capita, we basically mean per person. So we're going to take the real GDP divided by the population, or the number of people that we have. So I want real GDP per capita. PC, again, is just my abbreviation for per capita. I want to take my real GDP and divide that by my population. And I want to do that for both years as well. So I'll get Excel to copy that formula down. So now I have the real GDP per capita for both years. And remember, our goal is to find the economic growth rate, which is the rate of change or the percentage change in real GDP per capita. So now we've got the real GDP per capita. The last question we have to answer is, okay, then what is the percent change? How do you calculate percent change? So percent change, and this is just a general formula that will always be the formula for percent change regardless of what you're talking about. So in this case, we're talking about percent change of real GDP per capita. You could be talking about percent change in price. You could be talking about percent change in electricity usage per month, or really anything. But the formula you'll always use for percent change is you want value 2, or the second value, so I'll just say V2 for value 2, minus V1. So that's the actual change, right? The second number minus the first number, that's the change in that number. And then you want to divide that by your first number. So divided by value 1. And that'll give us the percent change in the value. So you want to know what percent of the original value is the change, really is what we're asking here mathematically. So, but really all you need to remember is this formula. You want value 2 minus value 1, all divided by value 1. So in this case, our values are real GDP per capita. So in this case, our economic growth rate is going to be our GDP per capita 2, or in year 2, which in our case, our second year is 2017, minus GDP per capita 1, or our first year in this case, which is 2016. All of that divided by our GDP per capita in year 1. So see, I've just taken the general formula for percent change, value 2 minus value 1 divided by value 1, and I've put it in terms of what we're talking about in this problem, GDP per capita. So we want our GDP per capita from our second year minus our GDP per capita from our first year, all divided by our GDP per capita in our first year. So let's get Excel to do that math for us then. So we want, I'll just do it in this cell here. We'll label it G, or growth rate, and we'll have Excel do the math. So I want in parentheses on top of the fraction. Again, we're referring to this formula down here. I want my GDP per capita in my second year, which is 2017. So it's this cell, minus my GDP per capita in my first year, which is 2016. All of that in parentheses divided by the GDP per capita in my first year, which is again this cell, 2016. And I'm given a growth rate of 0.094017. They asked for it in percentage form. We have it in decimal form. So how do you go from percent to decimal? You just multiply by 100, right? So I have the decimal here of 0.09. I'll take that times 100, and I have a nice percent. So my answer is 9.401709%. It says for us to round our response to 2 decimal places. So here that stays at 9.40 because the 1 will keep the 0 down. We'll keep the 0 at a 0. So 9.40% is our economic growth rate. 9.40%. And we're good to go. All right, so I'll pull back up the Excel sheet so you can look again at our steps here. First of all, we had to remember the definition for economic growth is the change in real GDP per capita. And we had to use what we were given to find real GDP per capita for each of our 2 years. And then we had to find the percent change. So how much did it change between those years? And we just used our percent change formula. This is one you may want to write down and have next to you in general, this percent change formula, because it's one that it's a It's a formula that you may not necessarily find in your textbook right where you need it, but it's just a general mathematical formula for how to find the percent change between any two values. So remember, it's just value 2 minus value 1 divided by value 1. And if you want it in a nice percentage, then you then multiply that by 100 as usual. You take the decimal, multiply it by 100, and you've got a percent. So if you have any more questions, feel free to stop by my office hours or shoot me an email.